Picture this, a country so massive, so unpredictable, so proudly chaotic that even in the age of satellites, drones, digital cartography, HD imagery, AI analysis, and every mapping tool humanity has invented, there are still places where the map just shrugs. Not unknown in the romantic explorer sense, known but never properly documented, half acknowledged, conveniently vague. And yes, believe it or not, this country is Brazil. Before I go deeper, let me pause right here, because if you're the type of person who hears something like that and your brain goes, wait, how does that even happen? Then hey, you belong here. Hit that subscribe button. Not the robotic subscribe now thing, I mean the human version. If you're drawn to stories that don't line up neatly, welcome home. Okay, now let's step into the jungle, figurative and literal. Americans tend to assume the world is basically solved, everything mapped, everything measured, everything labeled, the whole planet accessible from a phone. Want to see a random street in Tokyo? Done. A beach in Greece? One tap. A parking lot in Nebraska? You can count the cracks in the asphalt. But then you zoom in on Brazil and suddenly things get fuzzy, ambiguous, blurry. Huge regions look like they were drawn by someone who got bored halfway through the job. Brazil is gigantic, continental, ridiculous in scale, but the official tone always pretends that everything is mapped, cataloged, under control. And when you actually look at the maps, you realize that confidence evaporates faster than cold water thrown on hot asphalt. Let's start with the Amazon, the legal Amazon, a territory so big that Americans often underestimate it. Picture over half of the lower 48 states combined. Forest, rivers, wetlands, mountains, communities, wildlife, resources, conflicts, all layered on top of each other.
You'd think this would be one of the most precisely mapped regions on Earth, especially considering global attention, environmental alarm bells, government programs, NGOs, universities, NASA satellites, European satellites, private satellites, everyone watching. But here's the catch. Zoom in beyond the big rivers and the major deforestation patches, and the details fall apart. Smaller streams aren't documented. River mouths shift and no one updates them. Communities appear, disappear, reappear. Boundaries are approximations. Trails are rumors. Local roads exist mainly as stories told by the people who use them. The excuses? Predictable. It's too hard to access, it's too large, it's too expensive.
Right, and I couldn't go to the gym this week because Mercury was in retrograde. But this isn't just a technical problem. Mapping determines visibility, and visibility determines power. When a community doesn't exist on a map, it doesn't exist for planning, funding, protection, or emergency services. You can't defend land that the state itself barely recognizes on paper. And don't get me wrong, these aren't mythical villages lost in an untouched Eden. These are real people, real homes, real territories. And yet, large chunks of their world are represented on official maps like vague brushstrokes, broad, lazy shapes, generalities pretending to be geography. Now we head thousands of miles away to the northeast region, the Sertão. This is where the American mental image tends to fail. The Sertão isn't desert, it isn't a wasteland. It's a semi-arid region filled with culture, history, movement, and people who have lived there for generations. But modern mapping often treats it as an empty zone, something between rural and unknown. Villages disappear between map versions. Dirt roads that locals rely on daily are simply missing. Seasonal water sources, which literally determine survival, don't appear at all. Entire microregions exist only through oral tradition and locals' memory.
When pressed, officials always fall back on the same explanation: low population density, as if maps were some sort of subscription service where only premium users get detailed coverage. Maybe someone forgot to tell them that mapping is what helps build population density, not the other way around. And guess what? With vague boundaries, come land disputes, conflicts, farmers fighting over invisible lines, families using descriptions from old documents like "from the big tree down to the river bend," except the tree is gone and the river moved 20 feet to the east. Then we get to the cities, and this part hits especially hard. Brazil has entire urban areas that grew outside formal planning, often called favelas or informal settlements. But here's the interesting thing. Many Americans think favelas are just dangerous shanty towns. They're not. They're neighborhoods, complex, alive, culturally rich, but lacking the one thing that defines modern urban life: formal recognition. And because the state didn't plan them, the state pretends they're not there. Maps show vague gray blobs, no street names, no house numbers, no boundaries. It's like cartographers collectively decided if we don't draw it, maybe it'll fix itself. Spoiler, it doesn't. This invisibility affects everything. Emergency services get lost, mail doesn't arrive, garbage collection becomes irregular. Infrastructure is planned literally around these communities, not for them. And then there's the most politically charged area of all: indigenous territories and Quilombola communities, Afro-Brazilian groups descended from people who escaped slavery and formed independent settlements. If you want to understand how maps can be weapons, this is the perfect example. These communities need clear, legally recognized borders to defend their land, but the mapping process is slow, bureaucratic, heavily contested, and frequently influenced by economic interests. The less defined a border is, the easier it becomes for someone to step inside it and say, "We didn't know this was yours."
That confusion is never accidental. You can track illegal gold mines from space, but somehow you can't finalize a boundary for a community that's been there for centuries? Interesting. Every delay, every vague line, every missing detail, it all creates openings. And those openings often benefit exactly the people you'd expect: land grabbers, illegal loggers, large-scale agriculture, mining companies. They thrive in the gray zones. They prefer uncertainty. And all of this leads to something uncomfortable. Brazil isn't suffering from a lack of mapping technology. It's suffering from a lack of mapping intention. Because maps aren't neutral. Maps tell stories. Maps give legitimacy. Maps erase or amplify. Maps protect or expose. Maps decide who matters. And when half the map is blurry, guess what? Half the country becomes optional. Brazil's mysterious, unmapped regions aren't about geography. They're about history, politics, power, priorities. The blank spaces reveal as much as the mapped ones. They show where the state invested effort and where it didn't. They show who was considered important and who wasn't. They reveal entire populations that have been navigating a world where their existence is unofficial, unprotected, or simply inconvenient to acknowledge. So when people imagine the world fully mapped, complete, precise, done, Brazil is the counterexample. Not because it's wild, not because it's remote, but because it exposes something deeper. A map isn't a mirror, it's a decision. And in Brazil, many decisions were never made. If this unlocked something in your brain, if you like digging into the hidden, the forgotten, the incomplete, drop a like, share this with someone who loves strange truths, and stick around. We're not here to explain countries. We're here to expose the parts of their stories that were never meant to make sense.